Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're putting a really complex peace plan under the microscope. But here's the twist. Our analyst, well, it isn't human. It's an algorithm. We're about to see what happens when you strip away all the politics, all the commentary, and just ask a computer to analyze the raw text. So here's the big question, right? Can an algorithm really tell you if a peace plan is going to work? It's a pretty wild idea. What if you could look at a conflict by just taking the human emotion out of it? The whole goal here was to feed a computer nothing but the plan itself, the official responses, and the core ideologies, to see if it could find the exact logical points where the whole thing was likely to fall apart. Okay, first up, a plan to end war. Before we can even get into whether the plan could work, we have to understand what it's actually trying to do. What are the goals? And this makes one thing really clear. This is not just about a ceasefire. It's a blueprint for a complete overhaul of the situation. The idea is to tackle both the immediate security problems and the long-term humanitarian crisis. You can think of it as a two-part strategy. First, create security, then build prosperity. Section 2, the Algorithmic Analyst. So, how in the world does a computer read a peace plan? It's super important to get this. This wasn't some AI giving its opinion. Nope. This was a very structured computational process designed to get rid of any bias and focus only on the data. So, in simple terms, the algorithm got fed all the really important documents. The peace plan itself, Hamas's founding charter, official statements from everybody involved. You get the picture. Its job was to act like a detective, just cross-referencing every single claim, every demand, to find patterns, connections, and, this is the most important part, any direct contradictions. And the process it followed was actually pretty straightforward, a clear four-step logic. First, it just took in and sorted all the data. Second, it mapped out every single concession, the who gives what, who gets what, for each side. Then, step 3, the crucial part, an ideological test, where it compared those concessions to each group's core stated beliefs. And finally, it pulled everything together to create a purely data-driven conclusion. All right, section 3, the concession equation. Look, any peace deal, at its heart, comes down to one simple thing. What is each side willing to sacrifice? The algorithm laid out the demands on both Israel and Hamas, and honestly, when you see them side by side, the contrast is pretty stark. So, just looking at the big picture, the give and take seems clear. For Israel, the concessions are mostly tangible things, stopping military operations, releasing prisoners, handing over security control. But for Hamas, the demands are, well, they're existential. We're not just talking about giving up assets, we're talking about giving up their entire identity. Let's look a little closer at Israel's side of the table. The concessions are huge, ending the war, giving up security control, and releasing almost 2,000 prisoners, including 250 who are serving life sentences for terrorism. The analysis pointed out that inside Israel, these incredibly high-risk moves are framed as the painful but necessary price to get their hostages back. Now, let's flip to Hamas. The demands here aren't just transactional, they're transformational. It's not about giving up a piece of land or some assets. It's about giving up all weapons, all power, and, this is the big one, the foundational ideology that has defined the group for decades. And that brings us to the absolute core of this analysis. The algorithm did something really simple, but incredibly powerful. It just placed the plan's demands on Hamas, right next to direct quotes from Hamas's own 1988 founding charter. The results were pretty revealing. Here's the first fatal contradiction. The plan demands a complete surrender of all weapons. The charter, on the other hand, explicitly says that violent jihad is the only solution. According to the algorithm's cold logic, these two statements simply cannot exist in the same reality. Then there's the second major clash. The plan demands that Hamas give up all of its power. But the charter's entire purpose, right there in the preamble, is to use that power to achieve its ultimate goal, destroying Israel. So giving up power means giving up the entire mission. And finally, we have the third and most fundamental conflict. The whole peace plan is built on the idea of eventual coexistence, but Hamas's charter defines giving up any claim to the land, which you have to do for coexistence, as the highest form of betrayal, as high treason. So what about Hamas's official response to the plan? Now, a person might hear this and think, okay, that's a negotiating tactic, but the algorithm saw something very different. It interpreted this as just a simple restatement of their core ideology. Our weapons are inseparable from our final goal.
In the algorithm's view, this wasn't an opening offer, it was a non-negotiable fundamental principle.
And all of this leads to the algorithm's central finding. The plan isn't asking Hamas to make a deal. It's asking the group to commit ideological suicide. The demands require a total surrender that Hamas's own founding document says is forbidden.
So that brings us to Section 5, the algorithm's verdict. Given this deep ideological chasm, what was the final prognosis? What, if anything, did the analysis say was a viable path forward for peace? The verdict from the algorithm is, well, it's unambiguous. Based purely on the texts it was given, a negotiated peace with the existing Hamas organization is a logical impossibility. Their core principles and the core requirements for peace are, by definition, mutually exclusive. So according to the analysis, this logical dead end leaves only two possible paths to achieve the plan's goals. The first is the complete removal of Hamas as a military and governing power. The second is a much longer, generational process, a fundamental ideological transformation toward the idea of coexistence. The algorithm was incredibly successful at identifying ideology as the fundamental roadblock. But it also brings up one final critical question that data alone just can't answer. Whichever path you pursue, removal or transformation, what possible enforcement mechanisms could ever guarantee that the deal would stick? And that's the challenge this whole autopsy leaves us with.